In the autumn of 1348, as the leaves turned brittle and fell along the muddy lanes of Southwark and the city wards beyond London Bridge, a quiet dread settled over the capital like a fog rolling in from the Thames. The plague had arrived, carried likely by merchant ships from the continent, slipping unnoticed into the crowded port where vessels from Gascony, Flanders, and farther afield unloaded wine, wool, and spices alongside less welcome cargo. By November, around the Feast of All Saints, the first cases appeared in the poorer parishes near the river, symptoms at first dismissed as ague or bad humors, fever, chills, aching limbs, then the telltale swellings in the groin or armpit, dark and painful buboes that gave the disease its fearful name in later years. London, with perhaps 40,000 to 50,000 souls packed into its narrow streets and timber-framed houses, was ill-prepared. Overcrowding, open cesspits, and the constant traffic of people and animals made it a perfect breeding ground for what contemporaries called the Great Mortality, or simply the pestilence. Yet life did not halt abruptly. In the early weeks, the rhythms of daily existence continued with a stubborn persistence born of necessity and habit. Dawn broke cold and gray over the city walls, and the bells of St. Paul's and the parish churches rang out the canonical hours as they always had. Apprentices rose first in the cramped upstairs rooms above shops and workshops, kindling fires in hearths that smoked thickly from damp wood. Bakers fired their ovens before first light, the scent of fresh bread mingling oddly with the sharper smells of the river and the tanneries downstream. Fishmongers hauled baskets from the wharves, crying their wares through streets still half-shrouded in mist, while water-bearers trudged with yokes across their shoulders from the public conduits or directly from the polluted Thames. In the markets, Cheapside foremost among them, stalls opened as usual. Merchants from the Hanseatic League and local traders alike laid out bolts of woolen cloth, iron tools, candles of tallow and wax, and pots of honey. Housewives and servants moved among them, haggling in low voices over prices that had begun to creep upward as fewer hands brought goods to market. A cooper mended barrels near the Guildhall, the rhythmic tap of his mallet a familiar sound, while a blacksmith's hammer rang against anvil in the lane behind. Children darted between legs, some still playing at hoops or tag, though parents now kept a sharper watch, pulling them close if a stranger coughed too harshly or appeared flushed. Prayer remained the anchor of the day. In shadowed naves, priests celebrated Mass with fewer attendants. The wealthy paid for private chapels or chantry priests to intercede for their souls, while the poor knelt on cold stone floors, murmuring Aves and Paternosters. Fear of divine wrath drove many to extraordinary acts of devotion. Processions wound through the streets, led by clergy carrying relics and banners, the participants barefoot and chanting psalms. Some joined the flagellants who had begun to appear, men stripped to the waist, whipping themselves with knotted cords until blood ran down their backs, believing such penance might avert God's anger. As winter deepened into early 1349 and to early 1350, the scale of loss became undeniable. By February, chroniclers noted that more than 200 bodies were buried daily in the new cemetery hastily consecrated beside Smithfield, in addition to those interred in parish churchyards already overflowing. Graves were dug shallow and wide, layered with lime to hasten decay, and sometimes filled before the earth had settled over the previous dead. The air carried a constant sweet-sour stench of corruption, especially near the river or in the poorer alleys where rats multiplied unchecked. As spring gave way to the warmer months of 1349, the pestilence reached its most ferocious intensity in London. The city's population, already diminished by winter deaths, faced a relentless wave that spared neither rich nor poor, young nor old. though chroniclers like Geoffrey Le Baker noted that the young and strong seemed particularly vulnerable, their robust bodies succumbing swiftly to the fever and swellings. Parish registers, where they survived, recorded staggering losses. In some wards, half or more of the inhabitants perished between Easter and midsummer. The new burial grounds at East Smithfield and Charterhouse Square, consecrated hastily by royal command, received the overflow from overflowing churchyards. Trenches were dug deep and wide, bodies laid side by side in orderly rows where possible, though mass pits became necessary as the daily toll climbed. Lime was scattered liberally to combat the stench and perceived miasma, yet the sweet rot lingered in the air, carried on breezes from the river and the crowded alleys. Economic life, strained but not yet broken, adapted under pressure. With laborers dying or fleeing, wages for survivors began to edge upward despite royal proclamations. The Statute of Laborers, issued in 1349 and reinforced the following year, attempted to freeze wages at pre-plague levels and bind workers to their masters, but enforcement proved difficult in a city where demand for hands outstripped supply. Skilled craftsmen, masons, carpenters, weavers commanded higher pay as building projects stalled and cloth production faltered for want of workers. Food prices fluctuated wildly. Grain from the countryside arrived irregularly, yet royal efforts to keep supply lines open from distant ports prevented outright famine in the city. Alehouses and taverns remained open, though quieter, their patrons seeking solace in drink amid rumors of poisoned wells or divine retribution. Social bonds frayed under the strain. Families isolated the sick when they could, boarding up doors or marking them with chalk crosses to warn others away. Neighbors who once shared meals now avoided contact, fearing the invisible contagion that seemed to travel on breath, clothing, or even a glance. Yet acts of charity persisted. The wealthy endowed chantries for the souls of the dead, while guilds provided for widows and orphans of their members. The flagellants continued their grim processions, their blooded backs a public spectacle of penance, though authorities sometimes dispersed them as disturbers of the peace. In the royal court and among the nobility, fear mingled with pragmatism. King Edward III, away campaigning or at Windsor, issued orders to maintain order and supply, while his council grappled with the implications of depopulation. London Bridge, the vital artery linking the city to Southwark suburbs, saw reduced traffic as merchants hesitated to enter. Ships from abroad docked cautiously, crews sometimes refusing to unload if plague rumors circulated. As autumn deepened into the chill of late 1349 and early 1350, London began the slow, uneven process of emerging from the worst of the great mortality. The daily death toll, which had once reached 200 or 300 in the city's worst weeks, gradually subsided. By November 1349, chroniclers observed that the pestilence appeared to abate in the city proper, though isolated cases lingered into the following year, flaring sporadically in overcrowded tenements or among new arrivals from the countryside. Population had shrunk dramatically. Estimates suggest London lost between 30% and 50% of its inhabitants, perhaps reducing the number of souls within the walls and liberties from around 50,000 to something nearer 25,000 to 35,000. Empty houses stood silent in once bustling streets, their shutters closed and hearths cold. Weeds pushed through cracks in neglected courtyards, and rats, once bold in search of scraps, now found fewer competitors for the leavings of the living. Yet the city refused to become a ghost town. Those who had survived, often the hardier, the luckier, or simply the more isolated, returned to routines shaped by absence. Markets in Cheapside and Eastcheap revived with cautious energy. Fewer vendors meant less competition, and those who remained could charge higher prices for their goods.
Bread, though still made daily in the surviving bakeries, sometimes carried a coarser texture from hastily milled grain or substitutes like beans or peas when wheat ran short. Ale, ever the staple drink, flowed freely again as brewers recruited widows and daughters to tend the vats. The familiar smell of malted barley wafted from alehouses where men gathered to exchange news, share grief, and toast the departed. Labor shortages became the defining reality of the post-plague years. With so many craftsmen, servants, and agricultural workers gone, survivors found their skills suddenly in demand. A journeyman tailor who once earned a few pence a day now might command double or more, especially if he could stitch the finer woolens still sought by the wealthy. Women stepped into roles previously reserved for men, brewing, baking, even managing small shops, while children took on heavier tasks earlier than before.